Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's community event. It's great to see so many Brightspace community members joining us today. I see the numbers going up. I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. I am Julia, a community specialist here at D2L, and I want to welcome everyone for joining today's webinar. Before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. First, today's webinar is being recorded. If you have to leave early or want to revisit anything later, we will be sending the recording to all registrants afterward after this session. Second, we'll have time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. Please note that the chat is disabled, but you can submit your questions in the Q&A box at any time. You'll be able to find it at the bottom of your Zoom window. We have a team who will answer your questions during the presentation, and we'll also go through as many as we can during the Q&A segment at the end. So now, as many of you may or may not know, April 27th, this past Monday, was World Design Day. It's a day that recognizes the power of design in shaping the world around us, whether that's products, systems, or experiences. And in our space, design plays a huge role in how people learn. That idea inspired today's session because when we think about instructional design, it's not just about how content looks, it's about how it works, how it experienced, and who it works for. And that's where accessibility becomes such an important part of the design process. So, in today's session called Designing for Accessibility, it's all about exploring that intersection, how we create learning experiences that are not only effective but inclusive by design. We're especially excited about this session because we are collaborating with our instructional design team here at D2L. They're a team that focuses on creating engaging, effective, and easy to use learning experiences grounded in strong e-learning design practices. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to our speaker, Denis Lalonde, our senior instructional designer at D2L. So Denis is a teacher by trade and brings experience in both instructional design and accessibility. Today, he'll be sharing practical ways to build and structured accessible courses in Brightspace, along with tools and tips for remediation efforts. Before we officially dive in, we'd love to learn a little bit more about you. So I'm going to take a couple seconds to launch a quick poll in our screen. We'd love to learn where you are in your accessibility and design journey. So here it is in the screen. So please take a moment to share your responses. And while you do that, I'll hand it over to my colleague Denis, our session leader, to kick things off and take us through the agenda for today. The poll will close shortly after the agenda. And with that, Denis, I will officially pass it over to you to kick things off.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Julia. Hopefully everyone is able to see my screen as well as hear me clearly, and if not, please let us know and we can adjust accordingly. As Julia mentioned, I am an instructional designer at the Learning Services team at D2L. I've been doing instructional design work for about 10 years now, with a bit of teaching experience before that. Also, as Julia mentioned, I was a science teacher by trade, but quickly moved into the online education world and took a very strong interest in accessibility, which has kind of got me to where I am today, presenting to you on designing for accessibility. On the title slide, I have a quote which I think should resonate with everyone here. I hope it does, but it's something that we stand behind, and it's a quote from Dr. Sam, who is our global accessibility lead at D2L. And she says, "At D2L, we believe that every mind is valuable." And I think the core principle behind accessibility is ensuring that every mind is able to access the content and learn from the content equally. So hopefully I can share some tips and strategies today to get you to where you need to be. And I'm just kind of watching some of these poll results come in. I will share them on the screen. But I can see there is a little bit of a range of where everyone is at, which is good to know. I think it's important to recognize that the accessibility journey is a long and ongoing one. Everyone might be at different stages, but I think everyone has the opportunity to learn more too. You're welcome to continue filling out those poll questions as I jump into our agenda for the day. The first thing I want to cover is some challenges, hopefully some common challenges that you've probably heard or things that will resonate with you to kind of level set that we're all in a similar position and that we're all working towards the same common goal. As well as with these challenges that you might be facing, hopefully I can answer some of these questions along the way or provide suggestions to reduce the load of these challenges. After that, we'll be looking at talking about where you need to be. This is going to be a little bit of information about the guidelines that are often used when making accessible web content. We're also then going to talk about where you're currently at. And I think these two first topics are important because it's important to get a sense of not only your goals, but where you are currently in the process. And the reason for that, I will elaborate, but ultimately, it's because we're all in different places and we need to recognize what's most important for us and what's going to be most valuable for us in our specific spot of the journey. After that, we'll talk about some tools for the job. This will probably be the core of the presentation. We'll go over things such as the accessibility checkers, generative AI, and how it can be leveraged to remediate accessible content, as well as templates, which is a favorite of mine, and checklists as well. After that, I will share some resources with everyone on the call, things that you can take away that will hopefully help you develop more accessible content in the Brightspace platform, as well as to broaden your knowledge on general accessibility topics, because it is quite a large topic, and I think it's hard for anyone to understand everything about accessibility. After that, we'll have a short moment for some questions as well, and you are welcome to use the Q&A to start asking questions at any point. I will do my best to answer the questions as well as some questions that we've received prior to the start of the presentation, but please keep using that Q&A. And if we don't get to your question on this call, I'm happy to take your question away, get an answer for you, and get you a response to it as well. Julia, I am going to quickly just share the results of the poll, which I believe that will pop up on everybody's screen, but I'll just give you a minute to take a look at some of those responses. And we will move into our first topic, which is challenges. On the screen, you'll see a few of the challenges that I think are probably the most common. Hopefully there's something that resonates with you in these list of challenges. Having specific accessibility knowledge is a big one. Again, because the topic of accessibility and remediation is so broad, it's difficult for anyone to have a really strong and comprehensive grasp of all things web content accessibility. Myself included, I will be the first to admit I do not know everything about web content accessibility. However, I do have a pretty good understanding of what instructional designers, content developers can do and what they can leverage in the Brightspace platform to help make their content more accessible. Some things that you might be thinking about or questions you might have asked yourself related to specific accessibility knowledge that you might lack is how do I make sense of the WCAG guidelines? WCAG is a term you'll hear me say a couple times, but ultimately these, again, are web content accessibility guidelines to kind of help guide what content creators in making accessible online content. You may also be wondering, how do I know what needs to be fixed? And I will talk a little bit about auditing and reviewing your content to help with that. You might be thinking, how do I know what level of conformance do I need to reach, which we'll touch on next. Under the topic of lacking knowledge of remediation techniques, this is one where I'm always learning as well, or continuing to learn, but people are often wondering what steps do I need to take to remediate a specific issue, what tools or resources are available to help me along the way, which we will cover, as well as how do I know I've appropriately remediated content, and that will tie back into auditing content. You might also have some questions or concerns even about scoping and prioritization of efforts. There is I don't think any best practice when it comes to prioritization. However, I'm happy to share what we do on the Learning Services team when we are remediating course content. Um, you'll also be learning a little bit more about critical issues that I think are important to highlight early on and to identify early on. And we'll also talk about how you can consider prioritizing your accessibility efforts in order to effectively remediate your content. So the first item I want to cover is related to your goals as an organization or as an individual. And it's important to realize that everybody's going to be moving at a different pace to a different location, and that's okay. I think what's most important when it comes to remediating accessibility or content to make it accessible is that we are all making the stride or the effort to make more content accessible. It does happen slowly at times. It's usually not something you're done. You do once and then you're done forever. It's usually an ongoing process, and that's kind of why I've referred to it as a journey. The guidelines, as I mentioned earlier, WCAG, are something that I'm probably going to mention a few times. If you are familiar with them, I apologize in advance because I know that it can be a little daunting of a topic, but I think it's important to have an understanding of these guidelines so that you know what you are doing and ultimately how that ties into any regulations that you might be required to meet or specific conformance levels that your organization is being asked to meet. One thing we see a lot when we are asked to remediate content is clients are told that they just were asked to make their courses compliant. That's it. They don't know how compliant something should be. They just need to know that it needs to be compliant. And this is important for you as an organization to level set on, as well as to bring in stakeholders who might have a say in how compliant your content is. There's different guidelines or versions of these guidelines, which you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, 2.0, 2.1, 2.2. You can also see a little note about how these have improved or changed over the years. And they're always working on improving these guidelines and adding more to them as we learn more about disabilities as well as accessible content. Generally speaking, the 2.2 guidelines, which are the current guidelines, are the guidelines that are referred to when someone is asked to make their content compliant. There might be cases where you are referring to 2.0 or 2.1 based on your specific organization needs, and there's no issue with that. Again, it's all strides towards the same goal. Also on the left-hand side, you'll notice there's a few different levels of conformance. So single A, double A, and triple A. Double A is generally where most organizations or industries want to be. Triple A, there's fewer guidelines that you have to meet or fewer success criteria, but they're more strict in their rules. Some institutes, and again, this is going to be organization by organization, require that level triple A conformance or compliance. And it does require additional tools, additional strategies. And for the purposes of this presentation, I won't be covering much, if any, of those triple A standards. You're welcome to ask questions about them. However, they generally don't apply to the broader community. And level double A, the middle level there, is often, again, the most common issues with the most impactful changes when you make those improvements. There was also one question that we received prior to the presentation, which was related to the guide accessibility requirements and the nice to haves in 2026. What I would say to that is that the guidelines are always, again, improving upon themselves. So if you're always using the latest version, 2.2 or 3.0 when it gets released, and you're always aiming for the same level of conformance, say double A, you're definitely hitting all those nice to haves. Those are the nice to haves and the requirements. The one thing to consider with nice to haves is because of the broad range of types of learners, you get into nice to haves that are related more to universal design for learning and how you're designing course content. That is loosely related to accessibility. However, those improvements or those nice to haves generally are best practices for universal design for learning, but not required when you're trying to meet a specific conformance level. So I just wanted to note that as well. The next thing we're going to talk about is considering some things about where you're at. And specifically, it's important to know where your content is at or where it exists. So, with accessibility, it's a broad range of remediation tactics. However, you don't need all of them depending on how your content exists. So, if you are creating courses that are mainly just HTML pages, your approach to remediation is going to look very different than if you had courses that contained HTML pages, Word documents, videos, PowerPoints, PDFs, other third-party resources, etc. So getting a good understanding or getting a grasp on where your content exists and where you are in remediating that content is a great starting point for not only yourselves, but also for any stakeholders that you're answering to that might want to have a sense of what needs to be done to meet that compliance. The other thing I wanted to talk here before I show a little bit of an approach to remediation is um, if you are at the beginning of your accessibility journey, it's very valuable to have an audit performed on your content. This can be done by like a third-party organization. You can do it internally if you have a team member who has knowledge of the web content accessibility guidelines. And you're also welcome to reach out to the learning services team at D2L. We provide auditing services as well as some automated reports, which is a new offering that can help you get a sense of what work needs to be done on your existing course content, or if you aren't in the middle of remediating content at the start of a remediation journey. I would also like to highlight that the following approach that I'm about to show isn't necessarily the only way should be done. This is how we generally approach remediation at the on the learning services team. And I will talk about each of these points individually and why we do it this way. However, I do want you to know that depending on your specific organization and your specific spot in your journey, this might be different. You might want to reshuffle blocks around, or you might only need to worry about one or two of these blocks. But the first thing that we like to address or think about is assessing complaints and feedback if there are any on the content. And the reason for this is that if you have received a specific complaint or feedback about the content being inaccessible, it's likely that you have a user who it's directly impacting, and it might be impacting in that very moment. So these are often the most important issues. If you have a means for students to provide feedback in your courses, I would recommend leveraging the survey tool at the end of any of your courses to allow student feedback. Look at that feedback and critically assess if anything in there is posing as an accessibility concern. So something that's blocking the student from viewing the content or accessing any of the content, those would be critical blockers that I would recommend focusing on first. That's going to remediating those critical blockers is going to ensure or let you know that the majority of students can access the majority of content. And it also shows that, you are putting in the efforts and you do care about remediation. After that, there's other critical blockers that you might come across when you do an audit or a review of your course content. These might not have you may not have received a complaint about them, but they are the highest impact issues that are probably limiting a student's ability to see or access content, which is most important. After that, we like to prioritize the high impact, high frequency items. And this is where the majority of remediation takes place. These will be things like your alt tags, whether they're missing or improper. This will be things like reading order of pages so that screen readers can programmatically read pages properly. And oftentimes these issues, they're not preventing a student from accessing the content, but they might be hindering their ability to access it easily. or they might be impairing their ability slightly more than what should happen, making it more challenging for the user, but ultimately they can still access the content. The last thing to look at, and this is important if you are on a tight timeline or if the scope of your project is quite large, remediate lower sensitivity edge cases last, mostly because these will impact the fewest users. And so, if you don't have time to get to them here and now, at least you know that the high impact items have been addressed first. The lower severity edge cases you might be enticed to try to address first, simply because they're maybe easier to address. However, I would recommend leaving these towards the end if possible. One quick question, or sorry, I'm going to jump to another question we received prior to the presentation that was regarding best practices around the video tool, which I talked about knowing where your content exists. And I think the video tool, as well as videos in general, is a big location for content to exist in, or format rather than location. With the video tool, it's a great way to make accessible video content. The best practices around it are generally to make sure you're adding in captions with the proper language set, as well as non-auditory content should have, non-auditory content that's critical to the understanding of the content. For example, if something is shown in the video but not spoken aloud, that content should be written or transcribed in a detailed transcript, or a little bit more of a heavier lift, an audio description, which is a different version of the audio track that outlines those critical details, should be added to the video as well. So make sure you're using captions, you're setting the language of those captions, you're providing a transcript or a text alternative as well, and then you should be good to go. There are some other considerations when you're actually creating videos, such as, again, speaking out the actions that are shown behind you or shown on a screen, as well as the length of a video is another consideration. I believe we're going to pull up a couple midpoint questions, which I will ask Chrissy or Julia to do now. And as I do that, I believe they should pop up for you there. Feel free to answer these questions as well. This will help me get a better sense of, again, how we're currently approaching remediation on a broader scale, as well as a question about generative AI, which I know is a hot topic these days. I'm going to continue on with the Brightspace Accessibility Checker. The Brightspace Accessibility Checker is a very powerful tool when you are creating content. I would recommend getting into the habit of clicking the Accessibility Checker button anytime you are in an editor and building content. You don't have to do it, in between each paragraph or after you write each sentence. I would recommend completing a page, running the checker, and then making the changes and applying those changes and saving the content. The accessibility checker does work on content you already have that has been already created, so you can run it on existing content as well. You'll find a little icon with like a person in a circle representing the accessibility checker, and it should be in most places like discussions, assignments, quizzes, checklists, surveys, HTML pages that you build in the editor. You might need to expand the toolbar, and there's a little four-corner arrow button to help you expand the toolbar to see the accessibility checker in some of those locations. The accessibility checker is something that we are always improving upon as well. If you are curious about what the accessibility checker is checking for, you can find a link to it at the end of this presentation, but it's also available on our community as well. Real quick, I will just show some of the results from the poll. It looks like that there is a good mix again, but most people do use some sort of tool or checklist for remediating their content, which is great, and I love to see that. And then when it comes to generative AI, there's a lot of different ways that we can use it. I'm going to cover one of the most basic ways, but it looks like a lot of people are interested to learn more there, which is great. Oops, I'm going to share the poll, but I'm going to stop immediately and continue on. Like I said, the Brightspace accessibility checker is always improving, as well as the Oh, sorry, I forgot. I'm going to demo. If on the right-hand side of my screen, you'll see a couple examples of some of the checks that the accessibility checker does. So one of them is that lists that are improperly formatted, say you're using just a hyphen or a bullet, like the Unicode bullet, it will identify that these should be programmatically tagged as a list, which will help you know, use the list in the toolbar when you're formatting a list. So that's one of the checks. Another one that it's good for checking is making sure that your tables are accessible. So it will do some scanning of the read order of your table, as well as indicating whether a header row is missing. And lastly, another item it'll check is the structure of your page, which is a big one. Having your headings in a specific order is important for screen readers to know how to navigate the page and to help connect information and different topics as well. There's more checks that it does, and like I said, we will share that link. I think it's already been shared in the chat, but you will get it at the end as well. I was just talking about the Brightspace accessibility checker. The Microsoft accessibility checker, which is found in Word, I believe in Excel now too, although I don't use it too much, and PowerPoint is also going to be a very, very powerful tool that you should be leveraging when creating content in Word and PowerPoint. 10 years ago, this tool was not adequate. I will say that transparently, but it has had great improvements over the last few years, and Microsoft is always looking to improve it as well. It's also going to get a check nearly all of the common issues that you face in PowerPoints and Word, things like color contrast, read order, missing titles. All of these things contribute to improved navigability and operability of your content. And again, I'd recommend doing these accessibility checks or using these checkers early on in the process when you're building the content originally. However, it can be used on existing content if that you are working to remediate as well. I'm just going to jump to a couple different questions that I saw in the chat that I can quickly answer. One of the questions was, what is the recommended length for a video? This is very, very dependent on what the content is that you're teaching. If you're doing a longer lecture style video and you have to have, almost an hour's worth of content, consider chunking that into shorter blocks of content so students can digest it a little bit more easily. Maybe 15 or 20-minute sections is a bit more manageable. However, if you're just presenting a small concept and you just kind of want to use it as an engagement piece to engage the learner in a different media format, I would recommend aiming for no longer than 3 minutes. 2 minutes is usually the sweet spot. However, depending again on the topic or the presentation style, you might need a little bit more time there. But ultimately, very subjective. Regarding the video note and audio description track, you won't be able to add a second audio description track to a video note. However, you can attach it as a separate file. So you could link that either on the page or in the discussion or in your response, if you need to use an audio description in a response in a video note. And then there was another question regarding the plans to make the accessibility checker run in bulk. This is not something that is on our roadmap at this time. You're welcome to make that suggestion in Pi, which maybe Chrissy can share a link to our Pi site. Pi is where users can make suggestions on our product for those who aren't aware. But no, at this time, we won't be making that change to run the accessibility checker across content. It's something that's used to help you while building the content, not so much a remediation or auditing tool. I mean, it works for remediation, but it's not so much an auditing tool. And if you are interested in learning more about auditing your content, yeah, please reach out to the learning services community or the learning services team, as we do have a new offering to audit course content. I am going to keep this train rolling. And on this screen, I'm going to go real quick, but this is just to show you some of those common issues and the WCAG guidelines that they align to, that the Brightspace accessibility checker, as well as the Microsoft accessibility checker, is addressing. So if you are using those tools while you're building content, you're hitting all of these guidelines, which again is the bulk of many issues in those content types. I see another question about can you use the accessibility checker with a WordPress template site? I'm not super familiar with WordPress templates, but I do not believe so. Chrissy might have another response for that as well. Continuing on, I'm going to talk generative AI. Like I said, there are a lot of different ways that you can use generative AI to help you audit, review, remediate content. I've seen users use it for trying to get it to do kind of like an audit of their course content. I will say I would be hesitant with this. I don't think it's very comprehensive, and it's not really designed to do that. So it's going to do it the best of its ability. And as we all know, it might hallucinate at times, but that's one way you could try to use it. People have used generative AI to help create accessible templates for their content. I would recommend doing that. Always just have a human check as well along the way. And one very common way to use generative AI, which I would recommend everyone start to leverage if you have access to a generative AI tool, is using it to create alt tags. Along the top of this slide, you'll see where I think it's good, okay, and bad. When you are working with complex images, maybe these are, anatomical diagrams, economics graphs and charts or complex math, it's not going to do a great job there. One way I do like to use it is extracting the text from images. So that's why I said it's okay at doing that. I would still recommend having a human review whatever outputs you get. And it is good for generating alt tags on simple images, which I'm going to just run through a quick little demo now. You can see the image on the left, and I will describe it for our non-sighted users, but it shows a hand reaching up to an apple, which is attached to a branch in a tree. And what I did here was I wanted to just highlight the difference between kind of like a good prompt and a better prompt. So the first prompt I used to generate an alt text for this image, you can see on the screen, it reads, write alt text for this image, keep it very brief and general, don't include too many details. And the output I got was a hand reaching toward a fruit in a tree, which sounds pretty similar to what I just read out loud when I was describing it to our non-sighted users now. An improved prompt might look like this. So I've included the length that I expect, 1 to 2 sentences, as well as the main subject, mentioned the main subject, important objects, the relationship, the action taking place. These are all critical pieces of information, depending on the context, that you might want to include in an alt tag. And then you can see the improved alt tag that I received, which says a hand reaching up towards a yellow apple hanging from a tree branch with green leaves, as if about to pick the fruit. A lot more detail. Again, it did a good job staying within the confines that I requested, 1 to 2 sentences. It shows it does a better job of showing the relationship between the objects in the images, which could be very important for your use cases. Oh, my apologies. I wanted to show you the output, but there it is there. I'll give you a second to read it. The improved output says a hand reaching up towards a yellow apple hanging from a tree branch with green leaves as if about to pick the fruit. Now, this was a good little example for a rather simple image, but I do want to just highlight the context of your alt tag matters significantly, and it's always important to ensure that a human is still reviewing this content and the context. So say you wanted to take that improved output, that improved alt tag that we got, and put it on this image. Well, let's look at what the text around the image says and see if it makes sense in context. The text around the image, which just appeared, says, bell peppers grow close to the ground on shrubs. If you see one impersonating a yellow apple in a tree, scare the bell pepper out of the tree by making the hand gesture shown in the image. And now, on second, or with more information and more context, I think everyone can quickly see or find out that the alt tag isn't necessarily a good fit for this simple image. It described the image well. However, with the missing context, it actually wasn't describing what was trying to be portrayed in the image, which is actually a bell pepper disguising itself as a yellow apple in a tree. This is obviously a humorous example, but I think it could resonate, or it should provide a good sense that context matters, and using generative AI for alt tags is good. It'll save you some time. However, make sure you're staying critical and looking at how it's being applied or what it looks like in context. One quote that I think might resonate with some people on the call as well is this that says, sometimes visually appealing layouts and designs conflict with accessibility best practices. Fixing accessibility issues requires redesign of a large portion of content. I apologize, there's a little typo in there. And I think the sentiment is valid. I think oftentimes, if someone doesn't have a lot of experience designing the content, they might think that they're very limited in how their content looks because they're trying to fit this accessibility requirement. But I do want to say, with practice and with time, and as you see more examples, you can make very, visually appealing content and layouts and design strong visually appealing courses while still making accessible content. And one way you can do that is through the use of templates. We use templates in a wide range of ways. One way you can use them is for templating entire course pages. You can also use templates for templating parts of a page, such as like maybe an infographic that you're using over and over. You can also template assignment instructions, which will help instructors as well as developers of those assignments. You can template things like Word documents, PowerPoint templates. And if you are ensuring that accessibility is addressed early on in these templates, you greatly improve greatly reduce the chances of further accessibility concerns cropping up as you've created an accessible template that should be used, or that, if used properly, should address those accessibility concerns rather. Um, we like to use templates and then customize them for, different clients' needs based on color and different style elements. However, you can use templates in any of your courses now. It's as simple as just creating a page, an HTML page, and then saving that page in your content. Whenever you want to use that template, you can copy the code or copy the content on the page. And if you're a little bit more tech savvy, and there is I believe, a link that will accompany you in this, if you're a little more tech savvy, you can actually add your own template pages into the template drop-down menu of your builder as well. Along with the added bonus or the added benefits on the left-hand side, I will just quickly highlight that this example of an infographic that you see, it's fully accessible, it's templated, and we can reuse it within our courses. And it is built of very simple elements, such as just headings, paragraphs, a couple image layouts with text, and a couple images were denoted as decorative to give it some more style. On the same note of templates, this is an example where, in this case, we reused an accordion over and over. You can create a template with that code and use it over and over to save you from having to, create the accordion every time. I believe this accordion comes from the Creator Plus package. However, this practice of using snippets of code can be done and can be applied in any of the core Brightspace tools. On the left-hand side of this page, I just show this is something that some developers do when they're using a template page or when they have templated items. They'll make a page at the top of their course while they're developing content that has all of these code snippets, and that will make it easy for them to just highlight and grab the code snippet and bring it onto their new page. Again, I've been talking about codes and the source code. If you're not comfortable going into the source code to get these bits of information, you can still do this and copy the content. So copying the accordion, copying your, the page you've laid out, whatever it might be. One other thing I will say about templates real quick is that it's important to save templates where they make the most sense. So if you are creating a PowerPoint template or a Word template, you can definitely save it as a PowerPoint or a Word document. Don't convert it to a PDF. Don't upload it to Brightspace first. Keep it in the authoring tool that it makes the most sense. And same with HTML pages. Keep those HTML pages in Brightspace. You could also save them in a Word document, but if for efficiency, it makes sense to keep your templates where they'll also be used and in the format they'll also be used. Another item I want to talk about, which this one can be a little bit hit or miss, with some people, and I want to just give some warnings about checklists. There's lots and lots of checklists online that you can find and leverage. My preferred recommendation, if you are going to use one, is the WebAIM WCAG checklist. It's aligned with, I believe, 2. I think it's 2.2 now. It might just be 2.0. But one thing that it does is it's online. It's nice that you can filter by version and filter by the different conformance levels to meet your needs. I will say, however, this checklist does use the same language that's in the WCAG guidelines, which can be a little bit complex or a little wordy. And if you aren't familiar with that language or that verbiage, you might still need the WCAG guidelines open as well to kind of check the glossary to see what they're referring to when they say, time-based media, for example. The other thing with checklists to note that, again, at the very start, I mentioned it's important to know where you are at and where your content is at. If you go online and find a general accessibility checklist, it might have more checks or more guidelines than what you actually need or what might be helpful for you. For example, if you're not creating any custom, say you're not adding any custom JavaScript or CSS to your content in Brightspace, and you're just leveraging the existing Creator Plus tools or your core package tools and interactives, you might not need to check the more technical guidelines around focus indicators, responsiveness, mobile-friendly compatibility, because the Brightspace platform is already addressing those things in how we've built and developed the content. And for anyone that's curious to know a little bit more about the technical side of our conformance of our Brightspace platform and our Brightspace tools, including H5P and Creator Plus and Lumi, you can Google, and I didn't have a link for this, but maybe Crizzy can pull it up as well. But you can Google our VPAT, VPAT, which is an accessibility kind of audit that we do on our content every year. It's going to be a little bit more technical than probably what you're used to. However, it does provide insightful information for stakeholders or anyone maybe at your organization making decisions on what conformance level you need to meet and having that documentation to ensure that it is conforming. With checklists as well, I will say it's important to customize your checklist. So take out things that maybe aren't applicable to you. I have on the screen an example of a customized checklist that we like to use internally. Unfortunately, I can't share this one externally, but you can get a sense of how we have it organized. We have it organized by tools along the top. So all the tools are listed. And then on the left-hand side are the different criterias. And we use very layman terms for the criteria. We don't use the WCAG guidelines because it's easier to digest and easier for maybe a newer instructional designer to know what to look for. So I would recommend customizing your checklist in any way possible to focus it on your needs. These checklists are also very powerful for not only auditing, but also remediating your content and keeping tabs of where remediation is at. So depending on how you develop your checklist, you can use it for not just the auditing process to indicate, how many issues there are that we need to address, but also then down the road track those issues and remediating them along the way. And I believe that brings me towards the end. I will quickly take a look at some of these questions that came through and try to get as many answers out as I can. Julia, do you want to jump on now as I answer, or do you need to jump on now, or should I just answer some questions?
You can answer a couple questions, Denis, and
Perfect.
then I'm happy to close it off when
Awesome.
you're ready.
You just let me know. One of the questions reads, can you use templates for emails? Absolutely. If there's a type of email that you're sending over and over, and maybe it's a more complex email with some heading, like structuring in it that's important, such as multiple heading levels, or maybe you use a table, which is often victim to accessibility concerns. You can definitely create a copy of that email. What I would maybe recommend, I don't know if there's an actual template location in Outlook, there might be. However, you could email that to yourself or save it in your drafts and have that template in your drafts. Reusing the email template, you'll know that, your table is accessible, your heading order is done properly, et cetera, et cetera. And you could also even email that to other team members who might need that template. Um, like I said, there might be an actual location to save templates in Outlook. That's beyond my knowledge. However, it might be worth looking into as well. Shared. I believe the recording for this presentation will be shared. It should be emailed out once you receive it. There's a request, Christy, could you please re-show your ISO link? The table repair can be confusing to teachers even if they are aware of WCAG. Any chance this will be updated? Michelle, if you feel comfortable, you're welcome to elaborate on like maybe what the most confusing part is. I will just say there are generally a couple things you're looking for in your table remediation, which is ensuring that you have that header row indicating what the header of each column is or row, depending on the orientation of your table. Um, that can be programmatically done in Word. I forget exactly where it is, but it is in the toolbar when you have your table selected. And then the other thing to watch for is merge cells generally aren't accessible. Screen readers, they don't navigate them well. They often trip up on merge cells. So the general best practice is to avoid merge cells as much as possible. It's also important that you have descriptive headings in your row or column, depending on, again, the orientation of your table. Um, but yeah, I would follow those best practices. If there's a more specific question, I would be happy to elaborate. It's not clear that you are repairing the header row or columns. It's not clear that you are repairing the header row. I will have to, I think you're referring specifically to the accessibility checker tool. I'm going to take another look at it just to make sure I have a good understanding of what you're saying is confusing. But if you would like, you're welcome to submit like feedback as well through Pi again. That will go to our product team and they might have maybe a more technical solution that could make that more seamless for you. And on that note, as I said, I will do my best to try to answer all of your questions. I appreciate you sending in your questions, and I apologize I didn't get to them now, but I will hopefully get responses out to anyone else who had them.
All
Thank
right,
you, Julia.
amazing. Thank you so much, Denis, for sharing your expertise today. Really appreciate you walking us through such practical approaches to accessibility in course design. So I see that there was a lot of additional questions and feedback that we didn't get to. We have noted them and we will make sure that they're answered and shared in our follow-up email. So thank you so much for your questions. That said, if we can quickly share additional resources, Denis, we would love to share that with you. So I see that you want to do a quick recap on learning services. Take it away.
I was going to say, I'm happy to jump to this in the interest of time. Um, But yes, some of our community groups are a great spot to continue these conversations that we're having. They're appropriate to ask specific questions about your use cases or your organization as well. So please consider joining the Accessibility Interest Group, the Instructional Design Best Practice Group, as well as Creator Plus and H5P Group if you use those tools. Um, Again, the discussions are always open. You can ask a question at any time, and we'll always do our best to try to get a response there. Very helpful for your ID team, your content developers as well. And then, like Julia mentioned, some resources that I will be sharing out. I believe Chrissy is sharing them in the chat. Oops, my apologies. But these are things that I have kind of mentioned or touched on during the presentation, and some additional tools as well, such as color contrast checker, that might be valuable. Alt text decision tree is another useful one, as well as some courses from the D2L Academy, which I would highly, highly recommend you checking out as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Denis. So yeah, as we come to a close today, we just wanted to share a couple more community events that is happening next month. These are some of them that are coming soon. So please take a look at our community events site where you will learn for more information and registration will be coming soon. And finally, I think this leads to an official thank you and almost goodbye. Just wanted to let you know that once this webinar ends, a short feedback survey will pop up in your browser. It takes no more than 3 minutes. We appreciate your input, your feedback on today's session. It really helps us to improve these community events as we plan more for you in the future. That said, we will be recapping all the unanswered questions and resources and the community groups again that you weren't able to catch in the follow-up email. So please look out for that. And thank you again for everyone for joining, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.